You're with Clement Manyathela
on 702.
Let's walk the talk. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856.
92.7 and 106 FM.
7 minutes after 9 o'clock. Dumelang, welcome to the Clement Manyathela Show. It's a Tuesday, the 6th of May, a beautiful day here in Johannesburg. I hope it's an equally beautiful day where you are. Thank you for being with us here on 702. I hope you're well this morning. Hello to all of you YouTubers, if you're watching us on YouTube. Hello. You can comment there as well, remember, on the 702 open line or throughout the show, in fact, over the next 3 hours. It's easy to watch us live. You can just go to the 702 YouTube page to watch and listen to the show live. We start with the 702 open line this hour. You can share your thoughts with us about whatever is on your mind this morning, or if you want to weigh in on what we're discussing today, you can call us on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. So there's progress with the investigation into the missing case of Pretoria journalist Aseri Ndlovu. Remember, we spoke about this case yesterday. He and his partner have been missing since February. The police have now made arrests. 4 people have been arrested in connection with their disappearance. The first suspect was actually the last person to be seen in the company of the missing couple. The second and the third and fourth suspects that have been arrested were found with different vehicle parts believed to be that of the missing journalist. So once again, well done to the police for this progress, and I hope that it's going to bring some hope to the families of this couple. Now, can we talk about the DA court case? The DA has taken the government that it's part of, to court over the new employment equity targets for companies. So the party is against the amendments to the Employment Equity Act. And the amendment empowers the Minister of Labour to set numerical targets for equitable representation of, and this is very important, right? Because, and this is not what a lot of people who are against transformation, a lot of people who are against employment equity often say. This is very important. I'm going to repeat that. This amendment empowers the Minister of Labour to set numerical targets for equitable representation of suitably qualified individuals from designated groups of all occupational levels. And I'm emphasizing that because often when we talk about transformation, employment equity legislation, there are people who want you to believe that this legislation is meant to take whoever is a woman, whether they qualify or not. Oh, just take that woman. Oh, just take that guy because he's black. Huh? Oh, take that person who lives, who has a disability just on the basis that they have a disability. That's rubbish. That's never been the intention of this legislation. It must still be suitably qualified individuals from the designated groups that are being targeted, right? So these are flexible employment equity targets. They are not like rigid mandatory quotas. Employers can set their annual numerical targets in their employment equity plans, which must comply with sectoral targets. Employers can also justify their failure to meet the targets on reasonable grounds, obviously. Again, the DA will want you to believe that, oh my God, if you fail to reach the target, there's no way you can even negotiate that. When I was looking at this legislation this morning, there are reasons for non-compliance. For instance, if there are not enough job openings or the employer cannot find suitable candidates from the designated groups that are underrepresented for the available positions, the employer can say so, that I've tried, but I haven't found, and they can provide proof that I've tried, I just didn't have suitable candidates for this. And that's a reasonable explanation to why you're not meeting the targets, right? You could also justify if there are limited opportunities for promotion within the organization and the employer cannot provide promotion opportunities to designated group, or maybe there are not enough individuals from designated groups with the necessary qualifications, skills, or experience to fill the positions. And I can go on and on and on. I mean, even employers can argue about the economic downturns, whether it's COVID-19 or load shedding. You can argue that I've significantly been impacted. My company has been impacted. And that ability to achieve the targets is hampered. Those are some of the reasonable grounds that you can give for not meeting the targets. So the Department of Labor, of Employment and Labor has published the 5-year employment equity targets for, I think, 18 economic sectors. So they set percentages of the 4 upper occupational levels, like top management, senior management, professionally qualified or middle management, and the skills, technical or junior management, to be occupied by historically disadvantaged groups of people according to race, gender, and disability, because they've seen that there's an underrepresentation of certain races. And the whole aim is to address that underrepresentation of the designated groups in the workplace in relation to, of course, the economically active population. But, and this is important, employers would be required to comply with their own set annual employment targets. So it's not like government comes and says 10 people in your company must be black, or must be Indian, or must be white, or must have a disability. That's not how it works. Government comes with targets, but government says, you know what? We understand that contexts are different. If you live in Durban, for instance, and that's an argument the DA uses a lot, if you live in Durban and maybe there are obviously, maybe perhaps where you are concentrated more people of Indian descent living in Durban, you can set your own targets as an employer. If you're living in the Western Cape, where there are, if you will, colored people or mixed race people, that's what you can set as your targets as a company and say, this is what we are setting as a company as targets, right? So employers are required to comply with their own set annual employment targets towards the achievement of the 5-year plan sector targets. So, and then non-compliance with the act, of course, carries penalties, cancellation of state contracts. It's going to be difficult for you to do business with the state. But here's where the DA is arguing. The DA argues that if the law is enacted, a race belonging to a specific group concentrated in a geographical area could face exclusion from employment based on the national quota set by the minister. And I think the DA, once again, has proven how anti-transformation or anti-redress they are. Because they're arguing that the best path to achieving redress is through economic growth, through job creation, through inclusion. They argue that the new targets would drive away investors and shrink economic growth. I mean, do you think this creates a barrier to employment, these regulations, or advancement for members of particular racial groups in a particular area? And what do you think must be done to redress the injustices of the past? What must be done to level the playing field? Because the DA is making all sorts of arguments about, let's just do it through creating jobs. Yes, but when jobs are created, people who are being employed, through that we're seeing an underrepresentation of certain races. And not because there are no qualified people of those races who can occupy those positions, but because corporate South Africa sometimes is just not interested to transform. You must go look at the employment equity, the Commission for Employment Equity. They always reveal, year after year, they reveal how workplace transformation remains sluggish. Every year they're telling us that there's still an overrepresentation of white people in top and senior management positions. And this is in all provinces. I mean, the construction, the finance and the business sectors were their slowest in terms of transformation in the workplace in line with affirmative action. So basically, white males are still ranked high in top management positions at 56.4% in the private sector, and black Africans occupy only 15% of management positions. What does that tell you about a country when you look at how many black people live here, how many white people live here? And for me, it shows companies are refusing to transform. Corporate South Africa, I don't think, is interested in transformation. Parts of it. And I don't know if the companies realize that by refusing to comply with affirmative action, they're actually an impediment to the country's progress. I mean, the original Employment Equity Act of 1998 was implemented with the aim of preventing discrimination in the workplace and to address the country's history of structural exclusion on the basis of race. And these targets the DA is challenging, as I said, are going to be based on the reality of the various sectors. But the DA wants you to believe that, colored people are going to lose their jobs, or people of Indian descent are going to lose their jobs. That's why it's important to read the actual law, read the regulations, and not just take what politicians tell you, whether it's the DA or the ANC, because then you see the meat, what the companies are actually given the leverage to do. But the DA is good with fear-mongering. That's what they excel in, actually. Let me know your thoughts. 011-883-0702. WhatsApp's on 0727021702.
Clement Manyathela. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856
92.7
and 106 FM.
Morning, Clement. Listening to your show and your introduction on the employment equity discussion, it is a very emotive and very much a grey area discussion. But I am disappointed, that you are also buying into the narrative that if anybody sort of challenge or questions employment equity, then you're anti-transformation. That's absolutely not true. The problem with many of our laws in the country is the way that it's being implemented and applied and the consequences of that. So, a very emotional discussion, and a lot of people do put blinkers on. But I do expect more, Clement. Come now, you need to guide the conversation, not be partisan and making statements that if you are challenging employment equity, you're anti-transformation. I do not think that is a correct statement to make. And please, I am not a DA supporter. Thanks. Listening to the conversation.
Yeah, so first, I think you're wrong in that I never said that when you're challenging the legislation, then you're anti-transformation. In fact, I started even with Bongani to say it's not enough to just say, oh, this law is unconstitutional, or you're challenging it on technicality. I'm interested to know, how else do you think we can redress? That's what I'm interested to know. Of course, if there is a law that is unconstitutional, that must be challenged in court. We need constitutional clarity. I don't have a problem with that. But I can make a statement that I think the DA is anti-transformation because I say that with context. Because I've observed, I've watched the Democratic Alliance, I've reported about the DA, I have covered the DA's conferences, I've been part of discussions about what their position is on race. And I think what some of you sometimes forget is that I actually get paid to have an opinion. My job here is actually to have an opinion. And your job, responsibility, or part of the show is to have your own opinion. And sometimes I get swayed. Sometimes I'm like, Lebohang, you're making a good point there. Sometimes you think I enlighten you. That's the whole process of us having a conversation. That doesn't mean that I'm always right or that you're always right. So when I challenge something and I say, I think the president is indecisive, or I think the DA is anti-transformation, there's a context I give you. And again, that's why I spend so much time framing my comments. I've tried not to be a presenter or a host of a show who just comes and says, the DA says. No, I actually go and read. Like this morning, I read the legislation. I read the act. I write. Why? Because I want to be informed when I talk to you, to show you that I've actually given it thought. And based on the thought I've given this is my view. And I would like you to do the same. I'd like you to actually go read the legislation, come back and say, I've actually heard what you said, Clement, but this is where I disagree, or this is where I agree. So I think the DA is anti-transformation because I've never really had them give me a proper policy argument that says to me that they are interested. And I'm not just basing it on this court case. This is a comment I've made before. So let me know what you think of this particular legislation. I'm telling you what I think. I'm saying the DA keeps lying and saying colored people are going to lose jobs. Oh, Indian people in KwaZulu-Natal, you must be scared. Fear mongering. But when I read the legislation, that's not what I'm getting. In fact, when I read the legislation, government says, oh, if you're a company there in KwaZulu-Natal, you can set your own targets based on your own context. But that's not what the DA is going to tell you because it doesn't serve them and their narrative. Kustas, let's start with Tsepo first. Tsepo is calling us from Pretoria. Tsepo, what are your thoughts? Go ahead.
Hi, Clement.
Sure.
Clement, my input is that you need to restructure the economy, not just transform the boards. Because what we have a situation where 90% of our salaries, they go to businesses that we don't own. They go to businesses that we didn't set up. So if you to change and redirect our money to businesses that we own, then eventually you will have an economy that's transformed. Because if you are to do the legislation, even if you are to set up a transformation fund, which is also a joke on its own, because if you think about it, the whole government is a transformation fund, because the government, the black people who are in government today, they could transform the economy through the policies they put up in place. But they don't do that. They rather have a 100 billion transformation fund. At the same time, you have a situation where a few people who own the economy, they will always safeguard themselves because they don't want anyone to take bread from them. But if me and you, our salaries were directed towards businesses that reflect our values, whether they're white-owned or black-owned, ultimately we'll have a situation where the economy is transformed. So to look at it from a legislation point of view and only looking at the employment equity, the transformation exercise that DA is doing, it will only be short-sighted. What we need to do is to educate people about the power of the money that you have, because people will disrespect you if you don't use your money in a way that it serves you and it serves your community. And that's my take on this, because everything else will always be a repeat until you restructure the way the economy is. If you have 80% of the community supporting a business, that business has to, in a way, comply with what the community wants. And if they don't, the community can move their money to the next business that will comply with and work with the community.
And I suppose, Seppo, that's going to take a mind shift as well, right? Because there are some big businesses that come into our communities and we support them. And then when Seppo starts, his little small business there on the side, offering, the same services, sometimes as communities, we don't support that business because, some people think white is right. So I'm always going to go to big business because I trust their products more. And I think there's a shifting of the mind that is also needed among ourselves in our own communities to know that, just because this big business is black owned doesn't mean the service is terrible. But equally so, just because it's black owned doesn't mean they're going to offer a proper service. So it's okay also for us to criticize a company that is black owned. But I'm just saying, let's shift our thinking. Let's understand that power, our buying power, and exercise that. And I agree with you that that's going to help us then get to a better place.
Yes, I didn't want to be long, but I was doing some basic research on some of the areas I used to work around, and now look around as to how money is basically taken out of the whole community. Whether you have grant recipients getting their grants, or you have people getting their minimal wage. In a small village, a truck full of goods and services, a truck full of goods would come in at around month's end, and the whole community will go swipe their cards, and that whole money in the community goes out of the community, and then they are left with unemployment. But everybody has the goods that they wanted. And what I was looking at is how do you develop a system where you redirect the profits back into the community. Yes, it will be expensive in terms of educating and empowering the community, but that's the price that we have to pay to say, let's have faith in our decisions to say, if I support your, then I need to make sure that your business runs in a way that aligns with my values. If I value customer experience, I need to tell you that I want decent customer experience for me to buy from your business. If you don't, then I'll move to the next business. And if we did that 10, 20 years ago, today we'll have a transformed economy. But it's never too late to start.
Sorry, before I let you go, that research you were doing, was it just like you were doing it for fun, or was it part of your studies?
No. It's a product we are launching. We basically launching it on the continent.
Okay.
Hoping it goes all at one go. It's been 27 years, but it's done now.
Okay. All the best with that, Tsepo, in Pretoria. Thank you for your call, man. Kustas, you're in Midrand. What do you think?
Yeah, Clement, I hope my line is better. You can hear me clearly. Right. Clement, DA is just the face of many corporate companies in South Africa who do not want transformation. So DA itself is not anti-transformation, but the people who are funding DA are extremely anti-transformation. DA is in government today not to represent Gustav, but to represent Peter and Mark, who are owning businesses in the vast parts of the country. And hence you find that the ANC offers a lot of lip service on transformation, Clement, because a lot of these companies get away with these things for years without fine. If the ANC is serious about transformation, Clement, show me the quality of the lawyers they're going to send to court to defend this thing. They're going to send someone who's not going to defend this thing, and the DA will send the top legal minds in the country in order to do what? To win. So I'm suggesting to you, Clement, that when you look at the DA does what its constituency expected to do. So they didn't just go on their own today. When the ANC is told by its constituents, do 1, 2, 3, they don't listen. But the DA does. And it is not in the interest, for instance, of a member. Let's just say if Kutas was a member of DA. It's not in my interest. It's an interest of the guy who has given DA 500,000 million rands to make sure that it runs properly and everything. So they fully fund the DA. They take it to government. When they get into government, they want to make sure that everything that affects them is pushed back, and the DA has succeeded, while the ANC offers lip service. So there is the.
Yeah. All right. Kustas in Midrand, thank you for your thoughts. Jeff, what are your thoughts? You're in 4 ways. Hi.
Hey, Clemens, how you doing?
Good, brother. How are you?
Thanks for the opportunity, bro. Listen, I've got a few points, and I hope you can just give me the opportunity because the radio presenters often shut us down quite quickly. But you're in a position of power where your opinion is valued and you speak sense. But you often criticize the DA, and Kustas just did the same thing. Kustas, the DA is not it's not a white party, and that's the sense that I get. It's a party that's fighting for South Africa. And I think this comment is being viewed on a very granular level. What the DA is doing, we need to understand the true hurdles to economic growth in South Africa, and that's foreign direct investments. We need over 500,000 jobs to pull this country out of the mess that it's in. And the ideals and the policies of the ANC are what is hurdling that progress. So it's not about anti-transformation. It's about what are the hurdles to foreign direct investment. And those are the two major ideals of the ANC is what's hurdling that. That's the land expropriation, because nobody's going to invest 20 billion rand into South Africa if their land is not secure. And nobody's going to give an investment into South Africa if 25% needs to be given to black management. So those are the two fundamentals. And they're fighting for South Africans. The recent VAC win in itself is testament. That's a 75 billion rand saving that was made for South Africans, not for blacks, not for whites, for South Africans. And to go back to my initial point, you are in a position of power, and your constant criticism of the only party that's trying to fight for South Africa is, for me, very negative.
Okay, Jeff. Okay, thank you for that, Jeff. And I don't know what to say, guys. And I'm not going to direct this to Jeff because it's not the first time it's raised. I'm going to actually direct it to other people who make it. With respect, guys, I find it really lazy. I find it lazy to argue with me and want to call me, you always criticize the DA, because first of all, that is not factual. What was I called last week? I was called the DA's lapdog over the last 2 weeks. Why? Because I was busy praising the DA for having fought the VAT hike in court. Isn't that what I did 2 weeks ago? Wasn't I called Helen's lapdog? I was called all sorts of names because I was praising the Democratic Alliance for having thought of going to court, because had it not been for them in that EFF court case, we wouldn't be here. So I really think we could have just rational arguments, because I'm called EFF lapdog, or then the next time I hate the EFF. And if you've been listening to me for even just 2 years or just 3 years, you will know that I've been called all sorts of things. So today I'm probably going to be called an ANC lapdog. But with respect, I really just find it lazy to just make these statements of, you hate the DA, you always criticize the DA. And then I praise the DA, then you hate the ANC, you are terrible. What do you want me to do? I'm a host that's always going to have differing opinions. Today I may disagree with the DA, tomorrow I may agree with them. Today I may disagree with the ANC, tomorrow I may agree with them. I think Jeff raises a good point about foreign direct investments. I absolutely agree with that. That's important. But transformation is also important. I don't want to live in a country where, there's an overrepresentation of a particular race in management position in corporate South Africa. That's weird. That is so skewed. Especially if there are equally suitable people who can occupy those positions who are of different races and genders. This act is not just about race. This act is about gender representation. This act is about people with disability. And there are a lot of companies out there who don't care. As a white woman listening to us now, there's a company out there that doesn't care about bringing you up on board. But they're going to go and appoint a male because historically that's what's always been the position, and that's safe to do. But you are a white woman who is equally suitable, equally qualified to do the job. So I just hope that when we have these discussions, let's look at the actually merits of the case. I think it is lazy to just go call in and say, you always criticize the DA, because first of all, that's factual. I can give you many instances where I've agreed with the DA, where I've even tweeted and say, this is a DA win, and I get attacked for it, which I don't care about because I've got an opinion and I stick by it. So you raise a good point, Fred, but next time, just if you're going to say I always criticize the DA, then at least give me examples of that. It's 9:33.
Your voice,
Your station.
your open line
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
on 702.
20 minutes before 10 o'clock. Let's continue with your calls. 011-883-0702. Your WhatsApps on 072-702-1702. Lizzie, you are calling from Joburg. Hi.
Yes, hi Clement.
Sure.
You know, this the first caller and the caller you responded to is not only lazy, it's just stereotypical, thoughtless, and being emotional. This subject, there's no gray area in this subject. That is why there's a legislation. Legislations are there to make sure that there's no gray areas. Things are clear to everyone. The other thing, Clement, this is not a black and white issue. There are white companies that are very progressive and they understand the benefits of inclusivity in their businesses, because when you've got people from various diverse backgrounds and various views, that is how your business will progress. Having said that, there are some companies, corporate South Africa, it's very, very guilty. I'll give you an example of myself. I'm a CA, I'm a black female, I've got an MBA. I struggle to get a job from corporate SA. It's either you are too qualified, no, you don't have experience. No, we don't want people that work for government. So now where should I work? And I want to challenge the company, and you can give them my number. I don't have a problem. It's called Life Healthcare. That hospital is very arrogant, where they tell the recruitment agents, and it's not only that company, that they don't want people that have got government on their CVs. And I ask myself, okay, so then why don't you, your clients, your patients, why don't you also say you don't take people from government, you don't want their money, you don't want the share price to be increased by money from government? So I challenge the CEO and the board, the chairman of the board, to come on the radio to say that they never said this statement. I'm quite happy for you to give them my number, and I will tell them that their recruitment agent told me that they don't want people from government. It's not only them. Many, the story I'm telling you, talk to many black female CAs that have worked in government. They cannot work in corporate because corporate South Africa sees anyone who has worked in government as a corrupt person. We ran away from government because we are running from corrupt people. So we've got these qualifications. We are black, we are females, we've got qualifications for credentials, not only qualifications, credentials behind our CVs. We are sitting. We are doing nothing. We're trying to find businesses. We always find a brick wall in front of us.
Yeah. Well, Lizzie, thank you for your contribution. And yeah, that's so sad to hear. Someone who is a chartered accountant, who has an MBA, and they're still struggling to find a job. I wish you all the best. And of course, life, health. If you are listening to us, you want to respond to what Lizzie is saying. We're happy to give you that opportunity anytime. I think that, yeah, first of all, as I always say, I don't want us to call people names. So I want us to just disagree. Whether you disagree with Jeff or not, you can disagree with what he says. We don't have to call each other names. But I do disagree with the fact that legislation doesn't have gray areas. I do think legislation is not cast in stone. Even our own constitution, right? This beautiful, lovely document that we have, it's a guiding document for us, but it is not cast in stone. That is why we have the Constitutional Court that has changed legislation over the years. That is why the constitutionality of certain actions and legislations have been questioned. Legislation has been amended as well over the years. So I don't agree that that's like there's no gray area. In fact, sometimes there are legislations that are just simply of frustration. Legislation that must be amended. So we have the opportunity to do that. Legislation or the Constitution is not cast in stone. It's not some flawless document, like a holy document that must not even be questioned or challenged. Sister, you're calling from Parkview. What are your thoughts? Hi.
Hi, Clement. Look, you're right. There are gray areas everywhere, and I think that's why we always have to go back and look at things and rechange them. So just based on what I think previous callers have said, the DA has never been, for transformation at all. I think they cannot sit here and say that what the ANC is trying to do will disadvantage, black, white people, Indian or colored. Have they actually done the research to see how many black qualifying professionals that are sitting unemployed, mainly because they are black? And some of them are even in these organizations because they are black. But the mere fact that they are black, they are overlooked. You're black, you're a woman, you're white, you're a woman, you'd be overlooked. You're an Indian or a woman, you'd be overlooked mainly because of your gender. So I think they cannot be running to court all the time if they are representing the people. Even within the DA itself, if you look at it, how many of the black people that hold positions of power? We're looking at DA. You talk about Helen all the time. Helen has been there all the time holding a position of power. You have John Steenhuisen, who is holding a position of power. If we were to really go through, John Steenhuisen's qualification, does he even qualify to be in that position? He is there for the mere fact that he's a white man, and that's why they will always fight everything that wants to redress what is happening in this country. And I think it's very easy to say they're representing South Africans when they think some South Africans must be disadvantaged.
All right, sister in Parktown, thank you for your call. And to be fair on John Steenhuisen, yes, he does qualify to be in that position. It's not because he's white, it's because that's the nature of our politics. There is no requirement for you to have a master's or a grade 12 or a grade 8 for you to be a leader of a political party. Jacob Zuma was the president of the ANC. Did he have matric? Jacob Zuma was the president of this country. Did he have a postgraduate, undergrad degree? So that's not because John is white. It's just the nature of our politics. Even when you don't have matric. And yes, that's part of the problem. In some cases, because there are people who are there in council or in parliament who just have no idea what's going on. And they're supposed to hold the executive accountable and somehow understand legislation, understand the balance sheet, the income statement. They are struggling. And some of them have opportunities. I mean, I've said it before. I don't think, people like John have had so many opportunities to study further. In fact, I think John is at UNISA now. I even tweeted him and said, well done. Because I don't understand how you can justify all the opportunities you've had, whether you're John Steenhuisen or anybody else in that position, and you still haven't taken up a chance to go and study further to advance your knowledge, but you want to be a leader? That's questionable. It's 13 minutes before 10. Leon and Peter, I'll start with your calls after the break.
Your voice,
Your station.
your open line
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
on 702.
12 minutes before 10 o'clock.
Now, Clement, I disagree with Jeff that foreign direct investment, blah, blah, blah. If you look at the UAE, for any company to set up shop in the UAE, there are stringent laws that they must comply to. There are stringent laws that they need to give a certain percentage to the people of the UAE. And the UAE is thriving. Companies are still going there.
Yeah.
So no, this guy is not, he's just seeing it from, he's just seeing it from his point of view, where he's trying to use the certain things to strengthen his argument, but his argument is baseless.
Morning, Clement, Anonymous here. I think the DA's vision is that the country has enough employment such that, the equity element is easier to solve. At this moment, there's just not enough industry in this country. And therefore, the bigger focus should be on growing industry, grow the slice of the pie. And then when the slice of the pie is much bigger and is still growing, then you have a lot more to share, which may not disadvantage others. As it stands, yes, it's noble and great, but you are continuously sharing little and little of everything. And the more complex the employment policies, the lesser attractiveness we are to investment.
Good morning. My question is, should an economy in a democracy, in free enterprise, be responsible for race equity? Surely the idea in a capitalist market, and not a socialist, is that you have choice of company, choice of employee, choice of product. Just a question.
Good morning, Clement. Clement, the DA enjoys scoring on goals after they've won people over. They really think transformation will happen. People will just give up their comfort zones in the name of redress or in the name of fairness. Nobody's going to do that. They're not going to change the status quo just because it's the right thing to do. If it was the right thing to do, they'd have done long time ago. A long time ago. Instead, what's happening is it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. The privileged keep getting more privileged. So redress is important. These quotas are important. And they are fighting the quotas that stipulate that people need to be qualified, not just any person off the street can get these jobs. You have to be qualified. So they just like scoring.
Yeah. That's the point I was making earlier, is they always pretend, like people who are so anti-transformation or anti-employment equity legislation, they always want to use the argument that, yeah, they just want black people, or you just want that because she's a woman. No, that's not what. Then you haven't read the Employment Equity Act. And that's disappointing, because that means you only take what politicians say. You don't invest in reading yourself. Go read the Act. Go read the Constitution, because the Constitution also talks about fair discrimination. Why? Because the Constitution recognizes where we come from in this country. So even this legislation, that's why earlier on I was stressing the fact that suitably qualified, that's a very, 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 very important phrase in the Act. It doesn't just say that you must just make sure that these people are employed. No, it talks about the people have to be suitably qualified. That's very important. But people who are anti this, they always make you believe that, they just want you to take any woman. They just want you to take any black person. And maybe what we need to do more is to spend a lot of time also looking at, and that's not to say that our legislation is perfect. Again, there are so many defects in some of our legislation. We've spoken about BE before and where it needs to improve, where it's failed, etc., etc. And even in this case, I'm just thinking maybe sometimes what we need to do is to also speak more about the positives of the legislation like that. Because there are a lot of us that have had the opportunities we've had. Why? Because of that legislation. There are a lot of you listening to us right now. A lot of you, whether you're a white woman, a black woman, black man, or Indian, colored, whatever, someone with a disability, there are a lot of you out there that have got the jobs. You're sitting in that position And you've got every right to be there, by the way. You are very much qualified to be there. But you are there because you've been assisted by legislation. Because guess what? A lot of these companies are not interested. They're not interested in transformation. But because of and that's why legislation comes in. That's why it gets amended, because the picture is not changing. Overrepresentation of white males every time. Commission of Employment Equity comes with a report. They tell you the same story over and over again. That's why legislation is required, to force the companies to do what is right. Otherwise, we're going to look like we're still in apartheid South Africa. How, 30 years later, how are we comfortable with a picture like that? Leon, you're calling from Johannesburg. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Clement. I'll try and make it quick. Clement, for one, I think the DA is just true to their own identity and DNA. Remember, if you look at the DA as a party, they had some really progressive black people on very senior level. And when these guys started to making waves and making changes, they kicked them out. So in their mind, they really want white people on top and, a few black people that can jump according to what they suggest things should be. And in my view, I think there's this underlying assumption that, look, black people should go into government and then leave corporate South Africa to do what they want to do and operate accordingly. And I think one of your previous callers also mentioned on the WhatsApp group that, is this a social country, etc. A company is not only there to make profits. That's why they talk about this triple reporting. You need to look at the environment. You need to look at, there's a number of things that you look at, even the representation on your boards, etc. And there's always the excuse being given that foreign direct investment. If we look at, employment equity targets have been there before. If you then saying that this employment equity targets was there before, there wasn't significant changes. What foreign direct investments has been made to improve that? And my problem here, Clement, is that, if you look in terms of this new legislation, compare it to the previous legislation, if there are no very strict punitive measures for these companies, nothing will happen. And if I can give you an example, remember what happened to MTN a few years ago in Nigeria, where they have a $2 billion. And what happened then is that the board immediately convened. They jumped through loops and to make sure that, there's certain compliance that needs to happen, and there's certain changes that must happen. I think the same thing must happen within the South African context of these companies. We always have legislations after legislations, and nothing happens. I mean, we've seen the reports from year after year, but when are we get to a point where we're saying, these are the legislations, these are the punitive measures? I mean, if we're going to just look at the top 100 companies, and, I think these results are available, how much they actually sit on cash resources. So they don't invest in the country themselves for their own reasons. And even from the time of President Mbeki, right up, sorry, I don't know if you want to ask. But in my view, Clement, just to conclude here, even if we implement this legislation, as easy and liberal as it is and very, easy to comply with, unless there are some form of pain that the companies will feel for not complying, we will sit down here 10 years down the line.
You make such a good point there. And I remember asking the former Labour Minister, Tulas Mngxisi, this question about punitive measures, because even this legislation, Leon, is it's not punitive enough. Because you know what the companies do? If you're saying, we're going to fine you 10% of your profit, companies actually budget for that. They would rather budget for that extra 10% in case they're going to be fined for not meeting and not transforming enough than to actually go through that transformation journey. And that's why there must be serious punitive measures. And unfortunately, there aren't. And I'm not sure if that is going to push the company. I mean, for 30 years, clearly corporate South Africa doesn't want to move. Most of it doesn't want to move on the issue of transformation. So how do we force it to transform? If we're just going to bring measures that says, it's going to be difficult for you to do business with the government, we're going to fine you 10%.
You see, Clement, I've been a CFO of a few large entities and some of them listed. Here's the principal issue. When your fine is to an extent that it affects your share price, that you can't be budgeting for it, that's where the difference comes in. MTN can't budget a 2 billion fine,
yes,
because that would have an impact on your share price.
Yeah.
So, these are the kind of things that you need to go and look at. But also, what do we do? Because we need to start creating industries within the South African contract. If you remember, some of these share option schemes that have been cut off that, MultiChoice had them, Sasol had them, all of those share schemes that empowered black people. Those were all discarded. Why? Because it started empowering people, particularly black people. So really, in my view, Clement, for the sake of giving other people an opportunity as well, I think because the government, most of the government guys are in bed with these big entities. They sit, they have shares, they sit on some of these boards, and therefore they're not going to implement policies that's actually going to be punitive to the hands that feed them.
Absolutely agree. Leon, I'm out of time, but I think we've gotten that point. Thank you so much for your contribution, Leon. It's a minute before 10.